Hi, everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Insights. It's Metaphysical Insights now. See, I can't even get the first sentence out right today, so good luck. Fortunately, my very special guest today is far more articulate than I can be and doesn't stumble over his tongue the way I do at times. So I'll switch it over. Mr. Barry Fitzgerald is here with us today. He's got some new fascinating projects that he's put out, some YouTube videos and such on. Um, just a wonderful human being with a deep understanding and depth into the metaphysical that he keeps exploring. And very welcome. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you, William. And please, I stumble over my words as well, especially when there's a couple of whiskies in there, and the voice goes up in height.
I don't have that excuse yet, though. It's only two here. Yeah, this evening that could change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot going on, William, over here,
Hmm.
and I know that we're into the darkest months now
Right.
of the year for us here, and 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 of course by the time the 21st comes around, we're into the rebirth of the sun with the winter solstice, and
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to that. It's always a special time of the year, and I find myself up on top of there's a particular set of mountains close to here, and it faces west, and it's just beautiful to watch the sunset when you eventually get a clear sky, which at this
Right.
time of the year is usually you have to wait a long time
Hmm.
to get that. But it is a special time of the year. Um, but yeah, a lot of projects have been ongoing, and one in particular, which has really touched my heart, was the Sleeping Under Trees project, which is now on the YouTube channel.
Right.
And that particular project, it means a lot to me because it really does touch those metaphysical underpinnings
Hmm.
of this world of where we are. And the whole premise of the tree, or the whole premise of the project, was based around particular trees, and the emphasis of sleeping under trees was a practice that was used and utilized from the Near East, an esoteric practice in which you absorb some of the wisdom from the tree as you slept under it.
Oh,
So that's where that particular title and idea has come from the
fantastic.
esoteric practices of the Near East.
Is that
Uh,
why Buddha sat under the Balboa tree?
it may well have been, but each particular episode that I've been working on has a different tree. Um,
Okay.
the tree is the star. And
Ah.
within that, I will speak about the tree and and its particular virtues, and
Hmm.
some of the fruit from the trees we can eat, some of them we can't.
Right.
Uh, but it's about the spirituality of the tree as well, about how that was utilized by the ancient Celts and things like that.
Hmm.
And then we roll on from that, and into various different paranormal topics like poltergeists or various different styles of hauntings and things like that, and even the fairy make their way
Hmm.
into it, because we were speaking one particular week about the hawthorn, which originated from the Syria, which I was very amazed about. I didn't even know that. So,
I didn't know that.
but a lot of good feedback is coming from the folks that are watching it. They love the idea of the knowledge that's being expressed as well. But I also try and keep it lighthearted as well.
Right.
There's a few laughs in there as well,
Hmm.
and it's just more or less just to sit down, a bit of a chat, and so that people can see the areas that where I tend to find myself in,
Hmm.
um, and they are picturesque, um, and I find that the landscape resonates with me,
Hmm.
um, in that in areas that we could say and identify are spiritual,
Right.
reconnecting with the land. I think that's very, very important, and to know what's around us,
Hmm.
and I think I try and share that through sleeping under trees, that particular project, the video project. So I hope it works. But a lot of people seem to like it. So
My experience with it so far is it does work.
mhm,
And, life can get so crazy and hectic. And the brain, even we take 10 minutes to sit down or 20 and listen, the
mhm,
brain's going 15 miles an hour in all different
yeah,
ways now, which isn't healthy, but
mhm,
it's the way our society is sort of created us these days, I think. But you help bring me in and relax and let it absorb as well as think.
mhm,
It works on a couple of different levels this
mhm,
way. So it's
mhm,
the cognate um, process as well as the spiritual absorption type thing. You help take us to the spot,
mhm,
and
mhm,
once you're at the spot, then you can resonate with that deeper spirituality that seems to transcend the earth or the tree, but
mhm.
is inside of them.
Yes. Uh-huh,
Hmm.
uh-huh. We all have that spark of wisdom, and we all
Hmm.
can connect to it by
Exactly.
several different means.
Yes.
But there is that telephone line, if we like. It
Hmm.
is inside our core. It's just
Yeah.
how we identify the receiver to
Yeah.
pick it up and listen to
Hmm.
what's being indicated to us. And I
Right.
think we live in a world which is increasingly becoming more rushed and speedy. And I think it's important that we just take a breath, take a step back,
Hmm.
and just connect, even if it's just for 10 minutes,
Right.
just to connect,
Hmm.
and do that. And there's another project that I was working on, and it's called meditation without distraction. And those particular videos are up on YouTube as well. But it was important for me to go to various different locations around Ireland,
Hmm.
um, and in they're beautiful locations visually to look at. But what was important to me was not only the visual, but the audible. What was going
Ah,
on via the audio? Because nature, the videos did not need some harp music playing in the background, which I find irritating in all the meditation videos.
right.
It's distracting. What I
Yes, I
wanted
agree.
was to take the actual sounds in nature that was recorded at the time of the video and just let people be. They could watch it and just be. And I
Hmm.
think that was so important. Just
Yeah.
to, again, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes. It was just a fact of just stopping. Instead of running with the pack, running with the herd, we suddenly go, wait a minute, and stop.
Hmm.
And there are beautiful, beautiful locations there that appear within that video sequencing. Um, but yeah, I think it's vitally important that we stop, and not just as an individual. I think this is something that we need to look at as a species. We need to start slowing down. We need to go. We can't. We have to stop going at the speed that we're going, because we're now stumbling over mistakes that are growing and growing and growing, and they're becoming their own monsters. And we need to stop, and we need to take note of what is going on around us. And as a race, we need to do
Yes,
that.
I agree. It's like we're running towards a cliff, basically,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
quite oblivious to it.
Mhm.
And um, I'm not predicting doomsday or anything else.
No, 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 no.
It's just it's so obvious that everything keeps building and rushing instead of any thought. It takes time. We're told we have to multitask and be able to make snap decisions and everything else, and it doesn't work. That's not how we're created.
Hmm.
That's not our mechanism or our machinery. We really are not computers,
No.
and I think we forget that.
Yeah,
So,
there is that aspect to it, all right. And even the years past, the recent years past, there were things that were happening that had we have taken a step back and linked into ourselves and made that connection and stopped and just listened to our own intuition, things might have ended up slightly differently
mhm.
than where we ended up, as a race. Um, but who knows? Who knows? The videos are there for people to look at, and it's
Mhm.
entirely up to them. It's not a case of you will watch these; these will change your life. That's not what I'm doing. I'm
You're
just
not
saying,
creating a cult.
no, I have no interest in creating. No, this is just a case of it's almost like a gift.
Mhm.
This is the gift. It's up to you to use
It feels like a gift listening to them.
it. Hmm.
So, I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I have been working on some more of the autumn and winter videos for season two, and my God, the Irish weather just does not give me a break. So it's difficult trying to get all that in place,
Mhm.
and trying to find a day that I'm not getting blown off the mountain, or washed off the mountain.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we've had a bit of that ourselves. Although today is sunny, cool, but sunny and quite
Uh-huh.
lovely. 2 days ago, it was storming.
Oh,
Um, I think we get snow and ice in the morning. Uh, you know, typical.
but you just get great thunderstorms over there.
We don't get too many right where I am,
Mm.
but we get some. And, the mountains, the other side get more. The
Uh-huh.
central part of the country they get tons of 'em. Traveling through the Midwest as a kid in the pickup and camper with my folks
Yeah.
during the summers, we every night we had massive thunderstorms. It'd last half hour, an hour.
Oh,
Mostly sheet lightning. It was
yeah.
just my sister and I weren't always very bright. We didn't have air conditioning in those days in the camper and such,
Uh,
so hot, muggy days, we'd choose campgrounds often that had a pool,
yes.
and, we'd be in the pool watching the lightning storm, which isn't always smart, but,
But it never done you any harm.
that's right.
Yeah.
Um, a little bit of foolish luck, we would also be in pools by, like, Okefenokee Swamp and some of these places and
Yeah.
thinking, "Is that a stick down at the bottom of the deep end? Is that a alligator? Is it a snake? Is it" "Oh, it's not it's been 5 minutes, it hasn't moved. Okay, we'll get into this end of the door and see if it moves. Doesn't move, okay, we're safe."
Oh dear. It's
Yeah,
it really is crazy. It's crazy to see how things have changed over the past, even 40 years.
mhm.
Where growing up, the kids were out until the lights come on.
Yeah,
And they were gone. And nowadays it's more difficult for kids to disappear because of cell phone technology and camera CCTV systems and all the rest. It's much more difficult. Kids are much safer now, but it seems that we're more afraid to let them out.
exactly, exactly. And I grew up fairly rural, everybody had, 5, 6, 10 acres or something like
Mm,
that.
mhm.
Wasn't big farms, but, we could go we'd go hiking in the woods, let the parents know,
Yeah,
and you had to be careful because you never went alone because you can get
yeah.
hurt. And there would be people that have fox traps or different things out in the woods sometimes. Um, so but it was great. It was lovely. And
You've also got Bigfoot over there, of course.
oh,
Uh, And I was listening to some amazing stories coming down there from the southern states of the US,
Mhm.
where kids were out, and they were near the tree lines, and the Bigfoot were watching them. And the grandparents were out. They had to race across the fields to reach them in time, as this thing was tracking through the grass, trying to get close to the children who were playing. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating stories. And I'm sitting here kicking myself, thinking, "Oh my God, the Bigfoot!" And you've got the UFOs and everything else. What have I got? The fairies.
Oh, but I like the fairies, although we get those too, variations. Um, the county I live in is known to be one of the most active for Bigfoot in the country
Really?
or anywhere. Yes. And there's a river corridor not far from my house that's supposed to be one of the big active places. It's also the place where I did see a UFO one time when I was in high school.
Yeah, it's amazing. Whenever you're going through the accounts to see how often that Bigfoot accompanies a UFO or vice versa,
Hmm.
and also the smell that's associated with them as well, that can make itself known. It can be very pungent.
Hmm.
I hear, and so those are things that given half the chance, I would. Well, now, in fairness, on hindsight, looking back, whenever we were filming in Canada, we were over in Vancouver and Vancouver Island, in
Hmm.
fact, and perfect Bigfoot country.
Yes.
And,
Uh-huh.
and I took the car up one of the logging routes, um, and we had a what do you call it, a thermal out the side of the car, and we said, well, we'll give it an attempt.
Hmm.
But whenever it started to run through my head that we're getting so far off the beaten track that if I stop the car, I have no idea what a bear would do, where a bear would hide, or how I would compete with a bear if I was
You'd
confronted.
lose.
Yeah, more than
Hmm.
likely.
Yeah.
I actually scared myself, and I refused to get out of the car. And we ended up turning back into civilization,
Yeah,
back into town. But it's oh, you have some fantastic lands over there,
we do.
and spirituality and various different phenomena that goes on there. That, oh, I would be gone for decades into the wilderness if I wasn't afraid of bears.
Well, you've got a room at your disposal
Oh,
anytime you want, you and Donna, or you on your own.
mhm,
And we've had that conversation before, but and uh, we could. There are all kinds of things to go explore. I know some places to go.
mhm,
You're not going to get proof.
mhm,
I've had my own version of conversation with them, and it sounds weird, but I have seen one, so I know they exist. So
mhm,
I'm pretty more reasonably assured of my conversation. But they
mhm.
know what happens if humans know that, um, um, if humans can prove they exist, they
Yeah.
know they're going to be hunted
Mhm,
and they're
mhm,
going to be killed and they're going to wind up in zoos and all the rest of it.
mhm.
Um, but so good luck on real proof, but you don't have to take a picture. You can, see
Just
them and enjoy.
experience it. You could
Yeah,
just experience it for yourself. And
yeah,
I seen Eric there. He put up a post. He said that they make pepper spray for bears.
yeah.
Do you know, that brings back a memory that one of the film crew that I was working with said that they were up in Alaska, and they had this spray for the polar bear and flare guns.
Oh, yeah.
Now, they never told me what they did, because they just left me hanging with, well, we've got this spray for the bears and a flare gun, and then they walked off and left me with this image. And of course, I had pictured that they were spraying the polar bears, as they were attacking, and then they lit them up with a flare gun. We had flaming polar bear running across Alaska, and that's a cruel thing. He should never have left me with that image in my head.
With the, I'll uh, give you a little more clarity. The spray you spray it to keep them away a little bit. I mean, when you're close, and then the flares you shoot towards them or up as a way of scaring them. You're
Yeah.
not trying to set them on fire. So, and the pepper spray isn't so that they have pepper on you when they're eating you. But yeah,
Oh no.
and
Oh.
the bears around here are smaller, and as long as you don't startle them or become between a mother and her cubs, you're
Mm,
fine.
mm.
Um, you just when you're hiking around the wilderness, you don't want to see wildlife. You want them to know you're there, and they get out of the way. Yeah, that works for the cougar
Yeah.
and everything else.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, I've been following the stories there of people who have been tailed by cougars,
Hmm.
and tracked, and absolutely fascinating animals. But I certainly wouldn't like to come face to face now,
No,
unless I had some type of protection on me.
right.
And but there you go. That's
The
that.
first time I went out with a group of people to the site of a train avalanche, and it was an important experience for me as a medium.
Mm,
But I knew one couple briefly. We'd met once or twice. Others I'd talked to online, but a few of us from Portland met up with them, and this is up in the Cascades up in Washington.
mhm, mhm.
And I got out of the truck I was riding in, and all of these people had guns.
Mm,
They were all
mhm.
wearing sidearms.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, I'm going to be dead and buried up here someplace. And they said it was for the cougar and the
Of
bears.
course. Yeah, yeah. Mhm,
And my first thought, and I mentioned it, is all you're going to do if you hit one, you're just going to make it mad. And
mhm.
then they said, oh, we just fire into the air and scare it away. And I'm saying, yeah, but where's that bullet going to come when it comes down at 5
Well,
million miles an hour?
you
And they
know,
say,
I would be. This is something that I talk with my wife whenever we're watching movies, and the same premise I could certainly apply to this particular situation, in which you're being attacked, and the person lifts a lampshade or a spade and hits the attacker over the head once,
right,
and then walks away, and then like, no, that's not what you do.
no,
It's three, four, five times. Make sure they're not getting up. The same with the
exactly.
bullets. If you're shooting the cat, it's not just once, twice.
Hmm.
It's four, five, six times. Make
Yeah,
sure it's not getting back up again.
exactly. Exactly. Um, and poor cat, no, we don't advocate shooting them. That's not what we're talking about.
It's self-preservation.
Exactly. I'm more afraid of snakes. Right where I live, we don't have venomous snakes, but
Mm,
they're everywhere else. And
yeah,
it doesn't hold me back. I still go. I haven't been as many places as you have, but I've been a lot of places in the world.
yeah.
And I,
Australia is one of those places that everything down there wants to kill you, including the government.
oh, I didn't know
Everything
about
wants
the
to kill you.
government, but
Yeah. But yeah, it's a crazy place. I don't
mhm,
know why anyone wants to live down
I don't
there.
know either. I'd like to go, but mostly because it would be another continent.
Mm, mhm.
Um, you know, and that's kind of fun.
Yeah,
But
it's very far away. That's the only thing. I suppose it
mhm,
depends where you live.
mhm,
But certainly for me, it's a long flight. But
mhm.
I can remember down there. I was in I think it was Tasmania, and yes, it was Tasmania, and I was with Joe Chin and Dustin Perry. We headed out one particular day. It was just to see if there was something that we could see in Tasmania that we would go, wow, that was just amazing, because it always gives you the impression it's just around the corner.
Right.
It's just around the corner. So we took one of the jeeps and we headed off into the countryside. Now,
Uh-huh.
bear in mind when we were there, it was winter.
Okay.
It was cheaper to get flights and everything.
Hmm.
And so we ended up at this particular park. It was called the Devil's Kitchen. And we thought, oh wow, what's this about? We didn't know anything about it. So we ended up driving into the parking lot and parked up, and we walked. It was ages before we got to the Devil's Kitchen, and all it was this. It was an inlet from the ocean that came
Okay.
in and swirled around, and it was maybe a drop down of about 100 feet into the ocean below. It swirled around and then back out again. The
Okay.
Devil's Kitchen. It
Right.
was more like a sinkhole,
Hmm.
and so we were on our way back, and we ended up meeting a couple on the path. And whenever you end up in a situation spiritually, even from a situation where you end up going against the grain, you've got one person coming one way and another person, you're coming the other way, and suddenly in those moments the world slows down. It's like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing against each other. And I looked at the woman who was furious that we were there. Number one. Now, we'd done nothing to do this, to warrant this.
Right.
And she was furious that we were there, and I was studying her. And then my attention was taken to the man behind. And he was uh, uh, very tightly following her from behind, but he was holding the child. Now, the child was in a one-piece baby suit. But instead of a father that you would expect holding a child, he would hold it like that as he was walking. He was holding it like that. The child lay across his hands. And at that moment, I realized that that child was in danger. And even they cleared our sight, our vision of sight, and the three of us regrouped, and we all knew at that point that child is at risk. And we broke off and went in three different directions so that we could try and intercept these people to see what was going on, to keep an eye on that child. And we couldn't find them. They were gone. And we tried so desperately to find out what the hell was going on. And it ended up that we couldn't. We had no way of communicating with anyone or anything like that. And we
Hmm.
ended up making our way back to the parking lot. That's where they were. Now, bear in mind, they had already walked a great distance to get to that location, and they never went to the Devil's Kitchen. They must have turned and went back because we had interfered with whatever was going on.
Right.
And she was sitting in the passenger or the passenger seat of the car. She was livid, absolutely livid. Just this energy was imbuing from her that she was furious, that we had disturbed something, and the man was fastening the child into the seat. And I can tell you that particular day, and as true as I sit here, I still feel it, that day
Hmm.
we saved that child's life, but we don't know for how long.
Right. Were you able to? Is it even possible to report something like that to
We didn't know,
authorities? Or
we didn't even know to who.
yeah.
Our cell phones certainly didn't work down there. We
Right.
couldn't communicate with anyone, and never mind where we were.
Right.
We didn't even know where we were, except
Yes.
for the Devil's Kitchen.
Hmm.
Uh, but that was that, and off they went, and we headed off in the other direction. It was a very, very strange experience, but one that I will never ever forget. And if you ever get the chance to speak to Joe Chin or Mr. Perry about
Hmm.
it, you must ask them about it.
Yeah.
It was a
I,
weird one.
I will. I should get a hold of Joe. He's a nice guy. I liked him
Oh,
when we
Joe,
met.
he's a great guy. So is Mr.
Yeah.
Perry. But Mr. Perry was an amazing family man, I have to say.
Excellent.
I have great respect to him.
Yeah.
He was very attentive.
And that's good. I haven't met him before, so
Hmm.
I don't. I just know him from television and what you guys have
Yeah,
talked about. But
yeah, yeah,
um, so that's fascinating. I
yeah.
wonder. I wonder what that's about. That makes me then want to think. Um, do they still have? rituals and customs like that down there? Is
I
it
don't, I don't know. I really can't say, because the people the people in Tasmania seem to be nice enough.
mhm,
But it was just that particular event that
mhm.
completely switched it.
And
Because
with
at
that kind
that moment, my every sense that I had, spiritual, soul, body, was telling me that child is at risk. I was
mm,
literally going back to the devil's kitchen, expecting to see this blue jumpsuit floating in the water.
yeah. Mm. Oh, that would be horrible.
Oh,
What a
yeah,
miserable
absolutely.
oh, geez.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, that's heartbreaking. Um, and especially not knowing what to do.
yeah. hmm hmm
Um,
I'd never been placed in that situation before. I think again, when we fly into a country, we don't think of, well, are we going to need the services? You never think of that whenever you're traveling around.
no,
We should, but we
yeah,
didn't. We
yeah,
didn't. We were shielded from a lot of that stuff.
yeah. Oh, wow. And I always make sure I register with the embassy everywhere I go now too. Even when I go to the UK, I am register or to
Mm.
Ireland,
hmm
just because I figure if there is a problem,
They can reach you.
yep,
Yeah, or you
and
can reach them. Yeah, yeah,
yep, and I'm not doing anything that's going to get me in trouble.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I watch Midnight Express. I'm not going to jail in Turkey or any other place.
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but wow, you've got speaking of some of this kind of differently, you've had a case you were working on recently too with the poltergeist, were you, in the UK?
Yeah, yeah. I was investigating this. It was a very famous case here in Ireland, from 1913, and it's called um, Cunyon, the Cunyon Ghost, and it's up in
Okay,
County Fermanagh, just across the border. And it was the Murphy family that this activity seemed to happen around, and the husband the husband, unfortunately, he had died in an accident. I think it was 6 years before,
okay.
and he was on his way to the local mill, and I believe that the donkey that was pulling the cart bolted, and he fell and cracked his head.
Ooh,
And he made it. He made it to the mill, but he must have had some swelling in the brain, and by 6 o'clock that night he was dead.
mm,
So, the widow Murphy, she had, I think it was, seven children, and she survived in the location for those 6 years. And that's no easy task in that particular time frame,
no,
with that amount of mouths to feed. Uh,
they would have
she,
had nothing.
yeah, and she did, and I had great respect for her for doing that. But it seems that one of the children seemed to spark this particular type of activity, the poltergeist activity. It began with unusual knocks and objects moving within the kitchen,
Okay.
and then the sounds of snoring, and it began to spiral more and more and more. And they brought in several priests to observe this, and they also even reached out, to one of the local politicians who had come. It was a very well documented case,
Mhm.
for its time, and that's what intrigued me about this particular case. And the house is still there. What's left of it is still there, and it was an amazing experience to go back and just walk in those footsteps, if you like. Um, Now, looking at the case itself, I get the sense that it had more to do with the land than it had to do with the people in the house. Um, so I'm not quite sure what was going on there, and there is talk now of actually um, um, a project developing, which is going to see the house being renovated into a working museum, set in the
Ah,
time frame of the Murphys. And so, we're going to be able to go there and see what life was like in the poltergeist house. But not only that, but there is also talk of on the ground itself of being little chalets formed in circles, so that people can come and stay on location at that particular place in their own various little chalets, and maybe even experience something that may happen.
and you said they're formed in circles?
Yeah, the chalets will be formed in circles. Yeah. Uh-huh.
The first thought that came to my mind is that sounds far too much like trying to recreate a fairy ring. And what other kind of activity are you going to get into that you may not
Well,
want?
isn't that the thing? Well, when we go back and we look historically at the likes of the Greeks,
Mhm.
who formed a circle to commune with the gods. And
True.
then, you get that particular word, that reference being pushed into the Gaelic Scottish traditions there, where you've got kirk, which was the circle, and which is now church.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't realize that meant circle
yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah. You got this crossover from Greece into the
Mhm.
eventually settling within Kirk, and then the idea of the church, and but we see this distortion begin to happen where we moved from the cruciform abbey, huge abbey structure,
Mhm.
to this. There you had the circular situation where you had the round stones, the circular stones in place, for the Neolithic and things like that.
Right.
And then we moved into the triangular square, and the buildings kept getting bigger and bigger, and going up hundreds of feet, and you begin to wonder over the time, did we start losing the signal? And when we were trying to reach the gods. But I see now that there's a resurrection within some of the um, Catholic churches, in
Yes.
which they're being built in circle.
Hmm.
I just, every time I go into one, I'm always bringing the compass on the phone, and I'm having a look to see the directions. Have they got the directions right? But the orientation, of course, is very important. But yeah, they're sticking to tradition, and it's nice to see that old aspect of forming circle to commune with God,
Right.
with the
Well,
God.
and in the earliest days of the church, that when they were meeting at people's houses, they would have stood around the altar
That's right.
for communion to pray, and
Mhm.
it was a meal. People brought all kinds of food,
Yeah.
and you had a, actual meal.
Mhm.
Um, in Portland, we have some of the Catholic churches where the interiors have been changed around so it's circular, and the
Mhm.
altars have been moved out
Yeah.
because um, it's for everyone, and it puts everybody on an equal
Yeah.
playing field.
There
It's
was there was there was a book that came out some time ago, and sadly I wasn't able to read it completely, but it was this particular. The author was making reference to the etymology of words and how they were utilized within the construction of the old buildings, um, and the the idea of going through this huge stone structure, to the entrance, you went through the structure, and there was maybe a ton and a half lintel of stone above you,
mhm.
um, and the the word there, when you break it down, you went through the entrance, you went through the entrance, you were entranced the
Ah,
moment you walked through.
yes.
And then you walked up to the altar that altered your perception. So it was interesting to see, as I say, I wasn't able to get all the way through the book, but it was interesting to see the etymology and the way etymology can really give us clues to a lot of what was going on in the past.
Hmm. That makes sense. Uh, I would love to be able to have more communication with the people in the past. I go to the places and I can connect with the spirituality. I
Mm,
can't say for sure that it's what they experienced, but
yes.
what I pick up is that it probably is. And I notice the sameness of that all over the world in all kinds of different places.
Yeah.
Um, Not everywhere, but many of the places where they've gone, and the different layers match the
Yes.
different layers of religion. You still get that.
Oh.
Occasionally, you get one that fights, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
mostly not. But
Yeah.
it'd be fascinating to listen to them. I can see things going on,
Yes.
but actual getting a conversation going with what does this mean? How does this work?
Hmm.
Where are you going? It's a little bit more difficult to do for me.
It can be very, very difficult. Even from my own perspective, it can be very difficult to make that link, that connection,
Hmm.
because for me to connect, I have to have something that we have in common.
Right.
And our lives are so different now,
Hmm.
than what they were 1,000 years ago. So we have to try and find some common factor there. And sometimes it can take a long time to make that connection.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. I was in the Yucatan, and I was there with a group of people on a ghost cruise, and we had an amazing time there. But I wanted to juke off from the main crowd and give me my own space. I want to see if I can make a connection with something here.
Right.
And lo and behold, there was this overgrown area. It was to the back of one of the pyramids, and it gave me the impression of like a ballpark or something like that. But it was flat, but there was now trees growing out of it in various different locations. But it was there that I picked up on the essence of something massive, um, almost giving me the impression of God's state, but not,
Okay.
but very feline. And I tried every connection in the book to
Uh
try and make connection to this, and it felt like this particular energy just went, "Hmm," and
huh.
turned its head the other way. Didn't want anything to do with me, and I tried everything to make connection with this, and there was nothing. And
It
I
sounds
said,
like a cat.
yeah, I just have to give up at that particular stage. But
Hmm.
part of a tour came through, and within the tour there was a newborn child. The child
Oh,
was crying, and suddenly this thing went, "What?" And I got up and went out over toward where the people were with the screaming baby. That was the first time that I seen it really make a move. And within there were two tour guides there, from local tour guides, and within that particular group were able to understand that the tour guides were communicating between themselves. We need to get the child out of here.
ah,
So they must have knew that this thing was moving in. Whatever it was, I don't know. It was just one of those experiences that I just went, well, there's something else I haven't experienced before,
right,
and move on. It's something I never put into the books or anything. Those are just personal experiences
right.
that I chalk up over the course of my life, and go, oh, well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Some of them I prefer not to live, but some of them, yeah, they're interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. I've been pretty fortunate with most of mine. Um, I've seen, well, even in Troy, I've seen the blood sacrifice, but after the people were killed, not
Yes.
before. I
Hmm.
saw the cauldron with the blood and the women doing something,
Hmm.
um, and then found out that yeah, actually they did have sacrifice in that
Yeah.
way down at
Yeah.
that period. So, because I don't always know, but
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't watched the actual. I've watched a lot of things happen in the temples and the sacred spaces,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
they haven't been quite that bloody yet. So, um,
What I was able to from my own research anyway, was able to see that the beings that they were sacrificing to, it wasn't necessarily the how should I put this? It wasn't the person being sacrificed that was important. It was the nature of the blood that was important. It was the
oh,
energy. It was the energy in the blood. Now, the moment that the blood hit the ground, the energy was dead. So it was a brief. There was a very brief moment there that was exceptionally important to this, whatever this energy was, and what it was feeding from that.
okay,
Uh, and I wondered to myself what was going on in the likes of the Yucatan, where you had temples that were running 24/7 human sacrifice.
right.
Now, my God, what? And I can't even compute that in my brain. It just
No,
doesn't allow me to do it.
mm-mm,
It would have been a horrific thing to witness. But yeah, it was the essence of the blood. There was a key component within the blood that was very important, not the blood itself. There was an energy or something within the blood that seemed to be very important, and that was quickly expelled.
so that's something that indicates then that these priests were actually having a communication with some kind of a presence or
Oh
a
yeah,
being that
yeah.
really did want that. It wasn't a human invention to try to appease something. It was that which is being appeased telling somebody what it wants.
Yeah, yeah, that was often the price, unfortunately, when
Okay.
dealing with certain things from beyond the veil. There was always a heavy price to be paid for it. We
Hmm.
even see that right up through into wars and everything else. A lot of wars, we say, well, it's because of money and things. Money is going to be part of war, of course,
Right.
and the underlying factor. Forget what mainstream media tells us wars about. It's that, but
Oh,
there's something
absolutely.
else underneath that is
Hmm.
important. That we need to push the money to the side and say, well, what else is here?
Right.
And then
What's creating?
we tend to find their signature
Mhm.
within the underlying basement of war
Right.
and the need for blood.
What's creating the greed? What's creating? Yeah.
Well, the greed in itself is part of the ego. The
Right.
ego is being fed by this beyond the veil.
Right. That's what.
That
Mhm.
corruption, that's humanity's Achilles heel, is the
Right.
ego. And the moment that these things are able to infest and corrupt the ego, the game's over.
Right.
And even within paranormal research, we can see that within some groups who haven't understood the phenomena completely. You get this intrusion into the circle, and it eats
Mhm.
the group from the inside out. And there are certain patterns in which it follows, but one in particular is ego. Watch
Right.
for the ego.
Hmm.
That cannot be allowed to get out of control.
And I've seen that happen in any kind of setting,
Yeah,
um, business
absolutely.
settings,
Yep.
work settings,
Hmm. Hmm.
paranormal, any group of people, academic settings,
Yeah.
um, yeah, pretty much anything. And I don't know how to fix it when it starts. I can give the psychology behind it.
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
recommend a therapist, but the rest of it, ah, I
Yeah.
can't. I can't fix what that is. I've learned that most of the time I go elsewhere
Yeah. Yeah.
because
You
I
know,
don't want to deal with it.
yeah, in the early stages, if we go back and we look at the ancient Greeks and psychology and psychiatry in particular, psychiatry was about the fixing of the soul. It was about the repairing of the soul. Modern psychiatry is not that at all now. It's
No,
about medication. There's nothing to do with the soul. The soul is not being repaired, and the corruption of the soul is the corruption of the ego. So there is the situation that
hmm
that we're at. Um, But it's like many haunted houses. The problem is, William, we necessarily can't really fix it. It
Right.
has to be up to the individual, because
Mhm.
the individual at certain level has allowed this to happen. They have to take ownership of this.
Exactly.
And when we go in and we do our damnedest to clear a property, which can be successful, but within 1 to 2 weeks, because we couldn't address the symbiotic relationship that has developed between
Exactly.
them and it, that has never been severed, and within the 2 weeks it's back, and
Exactly.
usually more problems.
Exactly. I have found what I've worked with people on when they've had enough activity that they were frightened and didn't want boundaries, because often that works.
Mm,
Just set up, living together or existing
mhm,
together, cohabitation rules.
mhm, mhm.
But when it's based obviously on something being either fed or created out of
Yes.
anger, hostility, which
Mhm.
then feeds that circus, change all that around.
Yeah.
Um, get therapy as far as working on the issue, not just medication.
Yes.
Sometimes medication's appropriate, sometimes it
Mhm,
isn't.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but open the windows, the curtains, and let the sun in. Put
Oh, now you're talking. Yes.
put happy music in the place.
Yes.
Don't
Uh-huh.
watch scary shows. Take the fights off the site, off the property.
Mhm.
Um, put something, change the energy in the house, and that entity will either change or it'll go away.
Do you know, it's amazing that back in I think it was the 18th century, they had realized that um, uh, the likes of classical music was a way of breaking down. It broke down attachments, and it was very, very important. And even with property, even today, I would say, if there's no one else in the house, switch on the Bluetooth speaker and turn it up, and put on Mozart and enjoy your day.
Yep.
And nothing like that to clear your home is absolutely great, and something to keep in mind.
I've got stacks of Mozart CDs on the CD player, and the the radio is either on the classical station or public broadcasting.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if anybody's here or not. It's my house.
My house, my rules.
That's right. Same in my car. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
No, that
I do love the classical, but I'm also torn between European house and trance. I'm a great lover of that too.
Oh, I'm not familiar enough with that.
Oh, William, you have not lived. You have not lived. It is some fantastic beats there. Um,
Send me a couple of,
I will.
links
Yes,
if you think
I
about
will
it.
indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, loud, and big bass. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excellent. I love all kinds of music too. I mean, I'm old enough. Give me the psychedelic rock and the political activism rock
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
new wave and whatever else too.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm not a country western fan, and I'm not a fan of most rap or hip hop just because it doesn't resonate with me. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
most other genres. But
Uh-huh.
I have to. When you were talking about the poltergeist in the house,
Mhm.
it made me think of something, and you might know an answer to this. When we start going back to the beginnings of the industrial age in Europe, and particularly early Victorian, when you really got steam coming, you've got more with the coal miners going on, and these incredibly dangerous working situations. People are in the cities now. They're living in horrible environments.
Mhm.
And if the husband dies, which happens a lot with work accidents, plus then you've got sanitation issues and health and everything else, um, the family's in big trouble.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if there are as many. It seems like I hear of more poltergeist cases now than we hear of from the 19th century or the 18th century, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if they just weren't documented or if there's something else that's shifted, because the emotional piece that would create what so many people think of as creating a poltergeist, we would have had more of that energy back then, I would think, more
Yeah,
often.
there are several. Well, there are two distinct different types. There is the one that will influence itself through energy, and then there's the other one that is introduced by energy that we produce.
Right.
So there are two different factions there within the umbrella of poltergeist.
Okay.
Um, and the stress one, yes, is a very very interesting factor. And when you've got a death and you've got a family that's on the verge of breaking up and everything else, the stress you can imagine would be
Mhm.
tremendous. But there's a twofold thing going on there. In that back in the turn of the Victorian era and things like that, you had religion being a very key point, a very
Uh,
controlling factor there. So you didn't want to promote that particular idea. God will fix it, and Jesus will fix it, and here's a wee hymn, and that's sorted.
right.
So they tend to fix that within their own community,
Okay.
and nothing more was said about it. But today we don't see the same controlling grip of religion. So
Right.
those particular stories tend to make it to the surface more than
Okay.
what it used to be.
Okay.
So
That
I, I,
makes sense.
I definitely see that, and even within Islam, there, although within the Islamic faith they don't believe in ghosts per se, or poltergeist, they do believe in the jinn,
Right.
and the jinn's not far off a lot of the other phenomena that we tend to see within the paranormal community.
Mm.
Um, so they have their ways of dealing with it as well, which we would a lot of the ways we would recognize within Catholicism and within Western religion.
Right.
So then, yeah, it's just a case of I think more so than anything is that religion has been losing its grip, its control,
Okay.
um, and more of these stories make its way to the surface. I think also it may also be the case where we're not as afraid to connect with what comes through the other side. Where before there was always that fear,
Right.
the devil and the demons and things like that. We're not as afraid of that anymore, and so
Right.
we're more keen to make a connection without understanding that there can be ramifications from this. There
Hmm.
can be side effects from this. We need to understand what we're communicating with,
Exactly.
and we need to establish and make set our boundaries, and also understand that we can trust what's coming through because there's very little trust to be had from what's coming through. So we need to make sure that we establish a um, ground rules for this
Hmm.
phenomenon coming through, which is not being done for the
Exactly.
most part
Right.
today. And many doors are being opened, and everything's coming through.
Right. And so much is mislabeled. And again, going back, in my opinion, going back to ego,
Yes,
because people have to feel important and stand out. So they're the only one that can slay the demons, and the archangels are telling them what
yes,
to do and all the rest of it.
and
And
you make a good point there, and that is being mislabeled. It's interesting that we have. I'll give you an example. We have this idea of being able to reach out to the universe, and say what you want, and it'll come back to you, and you will be rewarded and all the rest. And there are several books across the bookstores. 13 years ago, there was a great one that came out called The Secret. This idea of being able to pool the information and what you want from the universe. And we were led to believe, well, that was happening then. That's fantastic that the secret has been kept. No, that was a relabeling.
right,
2,000 years ago, the Druidic practices here in Europe knew that particular phenomena as called Grinhold.
Okay.
So it was the same phenomena. It's just we end up giving it these blasted new labels, which makes it difficult for anyone who's studying because you're saying, okay, the phenomena remains the same, but the masks continually change, the names continually change.
Right.
It puzzles me as to why we need to create and reinvent something which has been we've been able to follow up until that particular point. If anything, it serves to camouflage the phenomena
Right.
uh, and hinder us
Hmm.
from the true research.
Right. And with before the Druids, so much of that is based on some pretty good Greek philosophy.
Oh yeah,
And that was based on more Mesopotamian, where you create by speaking,
yes,
you control by speaking, you name things, and
hmm
you have control over it.
hmm
The Mesopotamian rulers, the statues wouldn't have their real names on them often,
that's right.
from my
hmm
understanding, is because
hmm
they'd have their true name that wasn't known to many,
hmm
and then the public name,
hmm
because you don't want some other power controlling you. And
Yeah.
how much of that really works, and how much is a concept of minds and philosophies that are many a millennium old, I'm not sure.
hmm
I
hmm
find that the power of positive thinking, as far as creating it, the fortune or the whatever in my mind,
hmm
hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of other things
hmm
to make it happen, and still luck is involved. But yeah, all of this we can trace back, I think, to a very, very long
hmm
period,
hmm
and people need to study history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I think from the Mesopotamian period we have a lot of information, not all of it, but we have a lot of information there that helps us try and understand at least
mhm,
the spirituality of the time and the idea of the king being exercised, the king being the head of the state and everything else, or the city, and for him, if he believed, or the spiritual practitioners around him as priests believed that something was attached to the king, you couldn't destroy the energy, but you could pass it along. So
okay.
they went through a particular process in which the king then was released from this attachment, and it was attached to a particular slave, a captive, uh,
Oh,
that had been brought in. They obviously had 3 or 4 people in place that were in the prisons, and they brought them out, and the spirit or the entity was attached to him or her,
okay.
and they were released and sent to one of their enemies. So they carried that poison into their realm.
Okay.
And that was a common practice back then. It totally intriguing as to what they were
Yes. I
doing.
hadn't read about that part yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I came across one of the papers there. I'm often sent papers, the various different papers from the British Museum and things like that, and they
Mhm.
describe a lot of that. I'm absolutely in awe in what they were doing. But for me, my interest goes beyond Mesopotamia,
Mhm.
and into the Ubidian culture. Who were the Ubidians? Um, and they simply didn't pop up from the sand. They had their cities as well. They had their
Mhm.
streets. They had their buildings, but we knew nothing of them.
Right.
And they were the mound. They also had mound builders there. But I think what intrigues me the most about the Ubidian culture is several of the statues which are now in London Museum display a reptilian nature in their statues, a bipedal reptilian, and one in fact is even is breastfeeding the child. So looking at this, and the archaeologists have agreed that these are not dolls. This
Right.
is a representation of something else, and they're absolutely amazing to see. Um,
I've missed those.
oh, I must send you a photograph,
Yes.
and let you see them. They're
Yeah.
absolutely
Thank you.
amazing. The Eubidian culture absolutely amazed me because, you know, people will say that humanity began in the cradle of Mesopotamia. No, it didn't. It went beyond that.
Mhm.
We didn't have the textbooks beyond or before then.
Right. And we're finding so much more every day
Mm,
with history, it seems, that are bringing to light that things that happened long before we thought they could.
yes.
Gobekli Tepe is an example, although
Yes.
that really was at the beginning of the Neolithic. I mean, close to it.
Mm,
10,000 years ago,
mm,
10,000 BC, give or take, was
mhm.
starting to farm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
their sites over there even older. It's part of what I love about Turkey.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
there are things about Turkey I don't like, but
mhm.
since I want to return there, I won't say those on the air. Um,
We do like Erdogan.
yes. Bow to the beloved. No, never mind. And I don't want any of my good friends over there to get in trouble. Um, but the process and the development, and then the spread of the ideas
Mm,
is part of what has always fascinated me
yes.
about history, about anything like this, and
Mhm, mhm,
watching it move out of the human species, plural, because
mhm,
there were so many of them,
mhm, mhm,
moving out of Africa and spreading. Then the offshoots that also developed in other places.
mhm, mhm,
Neanderthal didn't seem to develop in Africa. They developed, I believe, out of Africa. I could be wrong about that. I'm not very good at that
mhm,
time period.
mhm.
Um, but then you watch how metallurgy moved, how
Yes.
writing moved,
Mhm, mhm,
um, and it's looking actually like some of the culture, the megalithic stones and things like that, they're finding may have started more in Scotland than even in southern England.
mhm. Oh, yeah.
Is one
Yeah,
theory.
they come down through Scotland,
Yeah.
off the coast of uh, the Nordic countries,
Hmm.
and get down through Scotland, down through Orkney, and down into Ireland. And in fact, Stonehenge was one of the last great stone structures to be built.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but even, it's even fascinating the different uh, uh, fractures off of humanity's timeline to the different species, the and even uh, in Asia, finding those small bodies, which they now call the Hobbit.
Right.
I think they were around. I think it was something like 3 feet tall,
Hmm.
of subhuman species. It's absolutely amazing to think of all these different species that were there, and then finally, whew, it led into us,
Right.
and that was that. It's crazy.
Uh-huh. And some of those species we carry part of their gene pool.
Yes,
Not
they
all
live
of them.
with us. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I know I haven't heard of them for forever, but there were the pygmies in Africa that, as far as I know, are still around. They were
They
certainly
are.
around when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We just
Mhm,
don't hear of them anymore.
mhm.
Um,
I think the cannibalism isn't as rife as what it used to be. I
right.
still think it's going on, but not as much as it was. And
Right.
certainly the Rockefellers were ended up at, that ended up visiting their own family lineage with the Rockefeller's son. I think ended up being eaten in
Oh,
by some of the cannibals there.
I hadn't heard that. I believe it.
Mm.
Um, that was we could sometimes the rich and arrogant get into more than they bargained for. Um,
Yeah, there are warnings put out, even for the tribes in the Amazon. They say, "Look, this is our territory. Stay away."
mhm.
And I believe recently there was several fishermen were on a boat, ended up with engine trouble, and they ended up on the shore of the native tribes, and they were shot dead with arrows.
Yeah,
But that was unfortunate, but that's the way it is,
yeah,
and we
and
have
you
to
can't.
respect
You
their place. We can't. We have to stop invading and cutting down and everything else. We have to respect their place.
exactly. I agree. And there's an island off of Australia, um, where the tribe nobody's allowed to go
Mm,
because I think it's off of Australia. Maybe it's off of Africa. But not long ago, there was the government from the mainland arrests people if they know they're going over there or they've been there.
mhm.
And this guy, he was missionized, he was going as a missionary,
Oh, yeah.
and I think from the States. And his last attempt, he got in and was there, and they killed him.
Yeah.
The tribe did, and
Mhm.
that's part of why the government doesn't let anybody go. I
Yeah.
It's harsh, but when people are warned, I don't feel sorry for them.
Yeah,
Um,
it really is one of those things. I'm very much of the mindset of natural selection.
mhm.
And if you've been told enough times and you still go and do it, well, that's okay.
Yeah, that's exactly. Um, there was one more thing I wanted to mention a little bit or talk about before we end, if you're up for it. I know it's late your time,
Mhm.
but I wanted to get a little bit more of an idea to the viewers about your process putting together books in series of books.
Yeah. Hmm.
If that's something you want to talk about, we don't have to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't mind at all. People will often hear tell of downloads, people having downloads, and downloads of information, and you're writing it down and everything else. Um, and that primarily is what actually happens.
Hmm.
Um, Now, of course, I write the book, but a lot of the information that comes through, it's not coming from me, and it's unusual the way that it happens. And
Okay.
in fact, a huge download can come in, and you can write it all down, because until then, it feels like your brain's frying, until the information is out on its own, black and white, and then finally you're able to rest.
Okay.
Uh, and there are periods in which you could go several years before there's a download, and then you're off again.
Hmm.
And but that's the way it happens.
Now, are you collecting basically all this information? You're so much of it you're collecting through experience, just reading everything else, and it
Yes. Uh-huh.
sort of I describe it
Well,
as percolating.
there's a huge amount of it would be from download, in which the information that's already been collected is
Right.
then downloaded, sieved. There's a process of sieving, natural sieving, has to happen.
Right.
But all, say, over the course of a year, all the information has now been laid out and the connections have been made, and it's there in front of you clearly.
Okay.
And where before I wouldn't have seen it. I say, I
Right.
don't know what the hell this is. Why is this story so important? I'll save it and put it away. I don't know why that's there, but and then all of a sudden, bang, bang, bang. Maybe 12 months later, and then that's why that's there. That makes sense. That's connected to that, to that, to that, to that, and you get this run of information that ties it all together.
Okay. Yep. That's fascinating, and it's very much the way I've worked too,
Hmm.
including writing papers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. No,
mhm.
it was interesting. I was listening to a story, and it was a man who was playing music, and I think he was from Hawaii, and he played the guitar. But he was asked whenever he was in Hollywood, to come to a party and play some music, and he had his own experiences with UFOs.
Okay.
Uh, and he wrote this particular song about his experience with the UFO, and he sat down and he started to play, and he looked up, and John Lennon was in the group. He was there watching him, and tentatively listening to the lyrics. And obviously there was a lot of emotional pressure there that was being applied. But he played, and he played well, and he got an outstanding ovation and all the rest. It was great. But it was interesting that John Lennon came across to him and said, "It was an interesting story, or an interesting song that you wrote there." And he explained what had happened. He says, "Yeah." He says, "I never wrote a song in my life. It was always downloaded." So somewhere, who knows, maybe someone, some spirit or whatever the case may be in charge of enthusing us with ideas. If you look at the old Greek idea of the genius, it was always seen as being the outside, and it delivered through whispers and intuition and everything else about the
Right.
wisdom that was imbued in you.
Hmm.
And it was always seen that you, if you were great with the arts, with storytelling, with music, and writing plays, you were known as listening to your genius.
Right.
Where now we see the genius as being inside. Another mistake of modern
Hmm.
living.
Right.
Um, but it was always identified as being outside. So where do the downloads actually come from? So again, there's a lot to be learned from our ancient wisdom, and
Yes.
that we shouldn't be so arrogant to step on and say that's superstition.
Yes. I agree. I agree. I think that's a perfect statement to end the
Well,
program with. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, I know we've gone over, which I love, but I also know it's late over there. Um,
it's all good, William. I
okay.
think I've covered quite a bit. It's the meditation without distraction. I
Mhm.
definitely highly recommend it, and of course, sleeping under trees is
Is
another one
there?
I would highly
Okay.
recommend.
I will. I don't have them right here. Um, I will post those um, on this feed,
Sure.
or
Hmm.
when I send the links out later.
Yes.
I'll do those. I'll put the links to
Perfect.
both of those YouTubes out so
Thank
that
you.
people can get it.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and also how to buy your books.
Oh,
You,
just pop over to Amazon, and
okay,
the last one written there was "The Deception of Gods and Men." Highly recommended, and it comes in various different formats: hardback, paperback, um, ebook, and also audiobook. And I love the audiobook version.
take your time with this one, folks. It's it's very deep reading and um, one of my favorites. It's really an outstanding, an outs. I don't know what to call it. It's an experience in
Well,
an
wait,
emotional, spiritual, and intellectual way.
wait to the next one.
I can't wait. I'm excited. Yeah.
Oh, William. Well, thank you
Uh,
very much for having me on, and thanks for everyone who was listening. I really
uh,
appreciate it.
you're welcome, and thank you for coming. Take care, everybody. And we go ahead. I'll put the links up and share it, everyone. That's where we get most of our views is after the fact. And we'll talk to everybody later. Bye bye.